The giant squid. For centuries, sailors came back from deep water swearing that something with too many arms had risen up and tried to drag their ship under. And everyone on land nodded politely and assumed they'd been into the rum. Turns out the sailors weren't inventing anything. The kraken is the rare monster that never got debunked. It got confirmed. The giant squid, Architeuthis dux, grows up to 43 feet long, counting those arms. And its cousin, the colossal squid, is the heaviest invertebrate on the planet, tipping past 1,000 pounds. But the part that stays with you is the eye. Bigger than your fist, wider than a dinner plate, a single eye the size of a human head, staring up at you out of the black. Those eyes aren't built to hunt. They're built to catch the faint blue flash that erupts when a sperm whale, the one animal that eats them, comes cruising through the dark. A bigger lens catches more light, and more light buys a few seconds to run. Every monster on this list started the same way. Somebody saw something real, and their fear filled in the rest. The sailors weren't crazy. They were just a couple of centuries early. The narwhal. The single most expensive object a medieval king could get his hands on wasn't a jewel or a crown. It was a unicorn's horn, priced like a castle and trusted to sniff out poison at the dinner table. And it came off the face of a whale that nobody in Europe had ever laid eyes on. Here's the thing about that horn. It isn't a horn. It's a tooth. The narwhal has only 2 teeth, and in the males, the left one just keeps going, punching through the upper lip and spiraling out into a spear that reaches nearly 10 feet. Picture one of your own teeth deciding to grow. Now picture it breaking through your lip and out into open air. Now picture it stretching to 10 feet, wired with an estimated 10 million nerve endings, feeling the ocean around it the way your tongue feels food. Because that's all it really is. Not a weapon, a giant sensor, reading the salt and the temperature of the water, while biologists still argue about what it's actually for. Despite the name, there was never any unicorn. Norse traders were quietly selling the tooth of an Arctic whale to kings who were sure they were buying magic. They were really buying one very cold whale's tooth. The strangest thing in the whole story was the one part nobody made up, the manatee. Sailors didn't dream up mermaids out of loneliness. They watched a real animal surface next to the boat, cradle its baby against its chest with one flipper, and lift a strangely human-looking face out of the water. That animal was the manatee, along with its cousin the dugong, a group so tied to the legend that scientists literally named their whole order Sirenia, after the sirens. They're slow, gentle plant eaters, up to 11 feet long and 1,300 pounds, with paddle-shaped tails that flash at the surface like a fin. From a rocking deck at a distance, a rounded head, a nursing posture, and a tail breaking the water add up to something the human brain desperately wants to read as a person. Pattern matching, not magic. And here's the best part. The common version of the mermaid is completely wrong. When Columbus logged 3 of them back in 1493, he didn't write about beautiful women. He wrote that they were not half as lovely as the paintings, and that their faces looked, in his words, like men's. The mermaid was real. She just weighed half a ton and had a face only a sailor a very long way from home could love. If you're enjoying learning where these legends actually came from, I post new animal deep dives like this all the time, and subscribing really helps. Thanks. The Komodo Dragon. There is exactly one animal on Earth that scientists looked at, in the flesh, and decided to call a dragon. And they weren't being poetic. The Komodo dragon is 10 feet of predator that can bring down a full-grown water buffalo, and Western science didn't even confirm it existed until 1910. For decades after that, everyone told the same story about how it killed. The filthy mouth, saliva so loaded with bacteria that a single bite would slowly rot its prey to death. Great story. Also, dead wrong. It's not the dirty mouth at all. It's venom. In 2009, researchers found real venom glands in the dragon's lower jaw. One bite delivers a cocktail that stops the blood from clotting and sends blood pressure crashing towards shock. The dragon doesn't need to win the fight. It just needs to land that one bite then follow the wound, sometimes for hours, while the animal quietly bleeds out and lies down. Which means its entire hunting strategy is, essentially, patience. It took us until 2009 to spot the venom, mostly because it's hard to inspect the teeth of something that wants to eat you. The dragon doesn't need to breathe fire. It just needs one bite and a whole lot of patience. The oarfish. Just about every culture with a coastline has a sea serpent legend, and once you line them up, they start to look suspiciously like the same animal. A ribbon of silver, longer than a boat, rising out of water that's supposed to be empty. That's the oarfish, the longest bony fish alive, documented at 26 feet, with believable reports running past 30. It's a thin, shining band of metal, with a blood-red crest down its back, living hundreds of feet down where almost nobody ever sees it. And there's a simple reason it keeps surfacing in these stories. An oarfish only rises when it's sick, dying, or thrown upward by a storm. A surface sighting almost always means a doomed fish, and that's exactly the moment a frightened fisherman happens to be watching. Fear was doing the job it always does. Take something real, stretch it longer, give it an appetite. In Japan, the oarfish is the messenger from the sea god's palace, an omen that an earthquake is on the way. But that reputation is folklore, not science. A study back in 2019 actually checked and found no real link between oarfish washing ashore and quakes striking. Nature built a 30-foot fish, shaped like a party streamer, and then hid it in the deep. And of course, the one time it finally comes up, right before a storm, people decided it meant the end of the world. Gigantopithecus. The idea of a giant, hairy ape hiding out in the forest isn't pure fantasy. An ape that big genuinely walked this planet, and it was very likely still around while our own ancestors were figuring things out. Meet Gigantopithecus, the largest ape that has ever existed. Taller than the tallest man you've ever stood next to, heavier than 3 of them stacked together. A 10-foot, 600-pound ape. And here's the unsettling part. We built that entire animal out of almost nothing. Everything we know about Gigantopithecus comes from roughly 2,000 loose teeth and 4 broken jawbones. No complete skull, no skeleton. Just a giant reconstructed from a drawer full of molars. It lived in what's now southern China for nearly 2 million years, a plant eater most closely related to today's orangutans. And when the climate shifted and those forests shrank, being the biggest body in the woods stopped being an advantage and turned into a liability, because the biggest bodies need the most food. It almost certainly wasn't the upright, striding Bigfoot of the posters. It was a huge forest ape that quietly disappeared around 250,000 years ago. The largest ape that ever lived is absolutely real. We just showed up about 250,000 years too late to meet it. Extinction is just the monster we can't put a face to yet. Protoceratops. The griffin is one of the oldest monsters we have. Guardian of gold, with the beak of an eagle and the body of a 4-legged beast. And it shows up carved into the art of ancient people who lived nowhere near any creature like that. What they did live near was a whole lot of bones. Protoceratops was a sheep-sized dinosaur with 4 legs, a sharp bird-like beak, and a bony frill around its neck. And its bleached white skeletons litter the Gobi Desert, right along the old Central Asian trade routes. The folklorist Adrian Mayer put the pieces together. Picture Scythian nomads out prospecting for gold, tripping over beaked, 4-legged skeletons weathering straight out of the sand, and carrying those descriptions back west, where they slowly hardened into a legend. Which is a real leap, going from a sheep-sized lump of beaked bone all the way to a majestic winged guardian of treasure. It's a fun idea, and far from settled. A study in 2024 pushed back hard, pointing out the fossils don't actually sit near the gold, and that the griffin showed up in art earlier than the theory needs. So science is still arguing about this one, which honestly feels about right for a monster. The griffin guarding its treasure might just be a memory of the bones people kept digging up while they were looking for gold. The basking shark. Every few years, a sea monster washes up somewhere and makes the news. A long neck, a tiny head, 4 flippers, a body that looks unmistakably prehistoric. It's fooled fishermen, reporters, and once, an entire country. The animal doing the fooling is the basking shark, a harmless filter feeder up to 33 feet long. Here's what happens. A basking shark dies and starts to rot, and because sharks have no real bone, just cartilage, the heavy jaw and the big gill baskets are the first parts to fall away. Give it a few days in the water, and what's left hanging on the spine is a slim little skull on a long backbone with paired fins, which is to say, a perfect headline-ready sea monster. By now, the pattern's obvious. We don't build monsters out of nothing. We build them out of the animals we can't explain yet. In 1977, a Japanese trawler called the Zuio Maru hauled up exactly this off the coast of New Zealand and set off a national plesiosaur craze. Then the tissue got analyzed. Turns out it was never a plesiosaur. The amino acids, plus a matching basking shark that stranded 5 months later, gave the whole thing away. A whole country believed in a living dinosaur because a shark lost its face. The plesiosaur that made the front page was a shark that forgot to hold on to its own head. The dwarf elephant. The Cyclops, a giant with a single eye set in the middle of its forehead, comes from the same Mediterranean islands where ancient people kept hauling enormous, bizarre skulls out of the coastal caves. The eye in the center of that monster's face was real. It just wasn't an eye. On those islands lived dwarf elephants, animals like Paleoloxodon falconeri, elephants that had shrunk down to as little as 3 feet tall at the shoulder. And an elephant skull has one giant hole right in the middle of the face. That's not an eye socket. That's the nasal opening, the spot where the trunk attached. The real eye sockets are small and shoved off to the sides, where you'd barely notice them. Now imagine you have never seen an elephant in your life. You pull a skull the size of a human torso out of a cave, and there's one massive socket staring out of the center of it. Your brain has no category for a nose that goes there, a one-eyed giant. The terrifying Cyclops was, biologically speaking, a knee-high elephant. To be fair, classicists still argue about how much of the legend really traces back to these skulls, but the one-eyed giant was a tiny elephant, and the eye they feared was just the hole where its trunk used to be. The Greenland Shark. Cold, dark water breeds monster legends everywhere, from the open Atlantic to the black depths of Loch Ness. And there's a real animal cruising through that exact kind of water that quietly out-monsters every myth we've ever pinned on it. Forget how big it gets, though it does reach 23 feet. The unbelievable part is how long it's been down there. The Greenland shark is the longest-lived vertebrate we know of. It grows less than half an inch a year, and it doesn't even reach adulthood until it's around 150 years old. Radiocarbon dating of the lens of its eye puts individual sharks somewhere between 250 and 400 years old, and possibly past 500. Older than your country, older than the telescope. A single shark that was already gliding under the ice before Shakespeare wrote a line. In water this close to freezing, everything slows to a crawl. The metabolism, the growth, the aging itself. And the shark just trades speed for centuries, drifting along at under 1 mile an hour. Its flesh is so loaded with urea that it reeks of ammonia, and it very often swims around with a parasite latched onto its eyeball like a permanent wriggling contact lens. This one never needed our fear to help. It was already older than the legend, gliding under the ice before anyone wrote it down. And it'll still be down there long after we've stopped looking for monsters. And that's the pattern behind every monster on this list. Somebody saw something real, got scared, and the story did the rest. If you want more of these, where the biology turns out weirder than the legend, I post new animal deep dives every week. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.